Welcome to Gruesome, your horrific true crime podcast. I am Connie, along with Romy to my Michelle, Meg. And
Time
she's
for
going to
a
tell.
rewatch of that.
I agree. She's going to break your heart tonight with tell us about Marybeth Tinning.
Yes. And a word of caution about today's episode. We are dealing with infant death, and if that is something that is particularly triggering to you, I would suggest that you skip this case in its entirety.
All
The
right,
whole
I'm going to
thing.
go.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I didn't realize what I had gotten into until I was too deep. So here we are. But if you're here, I think you've probably at some point heard about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, whose mother, Dee Dee, claimed that Gypsy was suffering from a myriad of symptoms, which led to her being diagnosed with all these illnesses and diseases, leukemia, muscular dystrophy. And unfortunately for Gypsy, her mother had been lying about those symptoms so that she could be seen as the ultimate caretaker and just like a loving, supportive mother, which she was not. It stemmed from a mental disorder called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And the by proxy is added when it's like a caretaker putting symptoms on a kid. And it's Munchausen syndrome when they are pretending to be ill themselves or making up symptoms of themselves. And while Gypsy Rose is a very famous example, I want to talk about Marybeth Tinning, who is regarded as another example of this. Are you ready?
No.
Your face does not look ready. Okay. Marybeth herself was born on September 11th, 1942. She's a Virgo, in case you needed that information. Her parents, Ruth and Alton Rowe, had her in Duanesburg, New York. Her father was deployed overseas during World War II, while her mother worked to provide a life for Marybeth and eventually a younger brother who came along when she was 5 years old. When her father returned, he went to work for General Electric, and they led a fairly normal middle class life. Though there's not a lot of like super credible information on this. She did allege that her father was abusive to her. But the context in which she did that uh is it's noted in a bunch of different ways. Some of them say that she said it and then she took it back. Some of them said that she was just trying to draw attention away from herself. There's a lot of different reasons. But she said she was just punished for things that were simply like crying. Marybeth showed signs of unhappiness as a child. She felt like she was unwanted. She attempted suicide on more than one occasion. She told her brother constantly that he was the one that was wanted and she wasn't. She was an average student, and while she aspired to go to college, it just wasn't in the cards for her. As an adult, she found several different careers that worked out for her. She was a nurse's aide at Ellis Hospital. She was a bus driver. She was an ambulance driver, lots of different things. In 1963, when Marybeth was 21, she met Joe Tinning on a blind date. The two were married 2 years later in 1965. By all reports, Joe was quiet. For this entire episode, that is Joe. He's a quiet guy. He's not super emotional. He's just very there in the background.
Dad, is
Like,
that you? Just kidding.
I was like, is it him? Is he here? But wait.
He is a very cool. I think that's a dad thing. There's like two different types of dads. You have like the like very outgoing, like boisterous, or you have the just.
I was going to say boisterous, and you took the word out of my mouth.
Also, you get for taking a drink. Like
It is. Yeah. Joe also worked at General Electric. It was like the largest employer of people in that area. He was content to quietly watch television or go have a drink with his friends at the bowling alley. Didn't really fuss over too much. The two went about life working and starting their family. On May 31st, 1967, Barbara was born. On January 10th, 1970, Joe Jr. was born. In October of 1971, Mary Beth's father suffered and succumbed to a heart attack. But a few months later, it was the day after Christmas in 1971, Jennifer was born. So in just a couple of years, she had 3 children. Mary Beth and Joe's third child, Jennifer, was born with what's described as hemorrhagic. Hold on. Will you say that word? Hemorrhagic. Is that right?
Hemorrhagic. I have to look it up because now you're making me question the way I say it. I haven't really
I
had
know.
to.
I'm going to make you edit this part too. Sorry.
It's fine.
Hemorrhagic.
You said it right.
Okay.
Hemorrhagic.
Retake that. Jennifer was born with what was described as hemorrhagic meningitis. She had multiple brain abscesses. The entire pregnancy had been very hard on Mary Beth. She was sick and unable to care for her other children. She left them with her mother in law for sometimes weeks on end. She felt so bad. She knew something was wrong. And unfortunately, Jennifer only lived a little more than a week before she succumbed to her illness on January 3rd, 1972. Mary Beth appeared shaken, but doctors and nurses noted that she never cried for her baby. The hospital employees said that she seemed odd. Unfortunately for Mary Beth, this was not a time when there was resources or support offered to a mother after losing her baby. So it could have just been that she was in shock and
Yeah,
didn't
that's what
know
I
how
was
to
going to
feel.
say. Like, I am one who sometimes I can cry easy, but when it's like a huge dramatic event like that,
It's like you're
it's like
numb.
yeah, it's just like I've had family members die where if you didn't know me like personally, you'd be like, man, this girl is heartless
Oh,
because I
yeah,
just
for
like,
sure.
it's just like,
Well,
so
her
it could have
husband
just,
Joe took the news stoically as well. Again, he wasn't an emotional man. He took things, all things, good or bad, as God's will, not to be questioned. While Jennifer never left the hospital, her autopsy listed her cause of death as acute meningitis. So Mary Beth left without her baby and returned to her older 2 children, only to storm back into the hospital 17 days later on January 20th, 1972. With 2-year-old Joey Jr. in her arms, Mary Beth begged doctors to help her son after she claimed he had suffered from some sort of seizure and then choked on his own vomit. The doctors kept him under observation for several days. Despite extensive testing, nothing seemed to be wrong with the little boy. Within hours, she returned. Sorry, let me take that again. Despite extensive testing, nothing seemed to be wrong with the little boy, and they sent her home. Within hours of sending her home, she returned with Joe Jr. The little boy was lifeless in her arms. She claimed that she had laid him down for a nap after he told her he was tired. And she thought she would check on him after he slept longer than what was normal, and she found him blue, wrapped in his blankets. His cause of death was listed as unknown, and no autopsy was performed. So, in 20 days, she's lost 2 of her children. Barbara Ann was almost 5 years old when she was rushed to the same emergency room on March 2nd, 1972. 2 months after the day that baby Jennifer left this world. That was weird. Sorry.
yeah.
I'm having trouble. 2 months after the death of baby Jennifer and a month and a half after the death of Joseph. Barbara was having trouble breathing, and then she began convulsing. This is what her mother claimed. The emergency room was unable to help her, but asked that Barbara stay overnight in order to be monitored, and Marybeth declined. She said that they didn't need to keep her overnight, that she would take her home and keep an eye on her. The two returned home, only to come back again to the ER hours later, Barbara now unconscious. Barbara was revived, but in a medically induced coma, and she died the next day in the hospital. Her death was not reported to the medical examiner, but the hospital autopsy reported that her cause of death was brain edema, swelling of the brain. Due to her fever and convulsions, they told Marybeth that she had likely passed from Ray's syndrome. And at one time, a Ray's syndrome diagnosis might come from symptoms like that. But if there was a closer, more modern examination today of these, it might reveal that Barbara had been suffocated. Ray's syndrome and SIDS, which are both important to this case, were both brand new in the medical community. So there wasn't a lot known about either at the time. Marybeth had no children to return home to. All three had died within 3 months of each other. And they weren't all babies. She had had 2 loving, beautiful children for almost 5 years, 2.5 years. And as I'm reading Connie's WTF face, and you're like, wow, that's suspicious. There were different doctors every time she went in. And after her children died, no one wanted to be like, hey, did you do anything to your kids? Especially when they were overwhelmed with grief. Especially after Jennifer, who seemingly died from nothing that Marybeth had done herself. But maybe Jennifer was the catalyst that had changed Marybeth forever. She later recounted to a friend that Barbara had suddenly come down with Ray's syndrome, and the last thing she had told her mother was that she was going to see her little brother in heaven that night. But of all Marybeth's children, with the exception of Jennifer, they were all healthy at birth until their untimely death. And I say all because Marybeth continued having children. She had 9.
What?
Joe and Marybeth moved from their home in Mount Pleasant to a ground level apartment in Schenectady, New York, a fresh start for 2 grieving parents. On July 3rd, 1972, Marybeth contacted social services to ask how she might become a foster mother. In their file, the loss of Jennifer from cancer and Barbara and Joey from Ray's syndrome was noted. The social worker's heart broke for the Tinnings. She described the couple as warm. Marybeth was outgoing and noted that she was not ready to adopt, but she was determined to be a mother, and she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Joe was marked as saying that they just wanted to help a child, that they weren't fostering to fill a void in their lives left by the death of their other 3 kids. They were determined to be compatible with fostering, but it was also noted that they would probably be hurt when it was time for a child to leave their home. So they fostered a little boy for a short time and then a 10-year-old girl, and Joe grew really attached to the girl. She reminded him of Barbara. Marybeth's mother found her a job serving at a local diner, and she was soon transferred to another diner where her coworkers described her as erratic and having a short temper, but she was a great server who really got along well with the customers. Early in 1973, Marybeth lost interest in fostering when she became pregnant for the 4th time. She sent the girl back with social services and closed her home. I know. So, what a bitch. The file stated that the home was closed due to the physical condition of the foster mother. Joe was heartbroken. After the death of Barbara, her OB refused to continue treating Marybeth. because after Barbara, people started talking. Not talking enough to,
Alert the
police,
authorities.
to alert the authorities, but enough to say, this seems
sus.
Yeah, this. I'm very sorry. Yes, this seems sus. Like, we're not going to treat you anymore. But they didn't have proof. The doctor couldn't say that she had killed her children, but they began to assume that that was the case. So she got a new OB at Bellevue Hospital. Timothy Tinning was born on Thanksgiving Day, November 21st, 1973, at Bellevue. Timmy was a tiny little baby. He had jaundice. He weighed only 5 pounds, and he had a head full of white blonde hair. His parents took him home 2 days later, despite the doctor suggesting Timothy stay longer so that his jaundice could be treated. On December 10th, when he was only 3 weeks old, Marybeth rushed him into the ER at Ellis Hospital, already dead. She told the doctor, who didn't know anything about the Tinnings family history, that she had found him in his crib just the same way. His cause of death was listed as SIDS, and the nurses on the unit talked about how they suspected that maybe Marybeth had done something. Timothy was the first Tinning child death to be reported to a medical examiner. As we know, the system isn't perfect. The assistant, Emmy, never gave a report to the main medical examiner. No autopsy was ordered for Timothy. They had also noted that the baby had died of SIDS. Marybeth's sister-in-law, Carol, said that just as she hadn't at Barbara and Joey's funeral, Marybeth did not shed a tear. She seemed to enjoy the attention that she was receiving from the funeral goers. Carol had a son with cerebral palsy from a previous marriage, and he wore leg braces. And no sooner had Marybeth met Carol than she was asking if she could take Joel, Carol's boy, shopping at the mall. When they returned, Marybeth gushed about all of the strangers who had complimented her for taking care of him, considering, quote unquote, considering the shape he was in. Carol also suspected that Marybeth stole money from her, but she did not like her at all. No one had ever said anything like that to her at the mall. She just thought that she was kind of full of shit. And money itself was a point of contention for pretty much everyone around Marybeth. She spent it faster than Joe or herself could earn it, and faster than she could receive it, because Marybeth was getting an insurance check for the deaths of each child. In 1974, the money arguments between Joe and Marybeth continued. Carol's missing money. They had recently been robbed of all of the money for Joe's bowling club and some of his bowling supplies. Joe's brother urged him to leave Marybeth or get a vasectomy, especially after Joe complained about the money. And as of late, all of his food had been bitter, he also mentioned. Shortly after Joe told his brother this, Carol, the sister-in-law, awoke to a phone call at 3 a.m. Marybeth was screaming on the other end that her husband was dead. She and Joe's brother, Andy, rushed over and found Joe blue and tangled in his bedsheets. Marybeth was fully dressed in the corner, repeating over and over, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." Carol called the ambulance and the police. They got Joe to the hospital in the nick of time, and they were able to save his life. They told Andy at the hospital that he had attempted suicide with a lethal dose of phenobarbital, which is the same medication that Carol and Andy had asked Joe and Marybeth to pick up for them because Joel had to take it for his cerebral palsy. Joe refused to press charges, and he swept it under the rug. So tensions rose with Joe's family. Carol backed Marybeth into a corner and called her on her bullshit, which is why we stan Carol in this story.
Carol stan.
Carol is the only person in Joe's family who consistently called social services, tried to get people to see what was happening, and like called Marybeth out. She told her that she knew she had tried to kill Joe. She said she knew that Marybeth stole her money. She knew that she had stolen she knew that she had stolen the bowling club money, and Carol wanted her to admit it. And Marybeth broke into tears, and she did admit it. Carol told her, "You know what? You need help. Like, something is wrong. This isn't normal. Let's go see a psychiatrist." And so Carol took her to the ER, asked to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Andy, Carol, and Joe all sat in the waiting room for what seemed like an eternity. When they finally went to the desk to ask how Marybeth was, she had called a ride and dipped out of the hospital before seeing anyone. She just left them there waiting in the waiting room.
What a freaking
And life just went back to the way it was. Marybeth went back to work, and before long, she was pregnant again. Nathan Tinning was born on Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1975. Bright blue eyes and blonde hair, a beautiful baby boy. He lived for almost 6 months until the day that his mother rushed into the diner that she worked at and asked a fellow server for help because her baby was not breathing. She said she had stopped at a vegetable stand 2 or 3 miles down the road, and when she came back to the car, the baby was making funny gurgling noises. The waitresses called for help, but they asked her, "Why didn't you stop somewhere closer? Why didn't you go to the hospital? Why did you come here?" The manager was attempting CPR, and Marybeth just said she didn't know what to do. An ambulance arrived and rushed baby Nathan to the hospital, where he was placed on life support, but he did not make it. Everyone was horrified that this was Marybeth Tinning's 5th child that had died while in her care. When the cause of death could not be established because Nathan had no congenital deformities, it was listed as acute pulmonary edema. Due to the number of obituaries that had been posted, strangers had now begun to take note of the Tinning children's horrific fates. Her coworkers noted that when she returned, it was like she enjoyed talking about it. They began to quietly make phone calls to Child Protective Services about Marybeth Tinning. Carol and Andy adopted a baby girl. Marybeth seemed to resent the attention that the couple and the baby had received, so Marybeth decided that she, too, should adopt a baby. Michael was born on August 3rd, 1978. While she had been waiting to complete the adoption, she became pregnant with Mary Frances, her daughter, who was born on October 29th the same year. On January 20th, 1979, Mary Frances hung lifeless in her mother's arms as she was rushed into St. Clair's emergency room in an all too familiar scene. She had been found lifeless in her crib, but this time, the ER staff was able to revive Mary Frances, and it led to a diagnosis of aborted SIDS, which is what happens when they're right on the cusp, but they are able to be revived. The hospital insisted on keeping Mary Frances in the pediatric ward for 2 weeks. And while the staff was suspicious at first, Marybeth seemed to genuinely love her children, alive and dead. She talked about them. She coddled Mary Frances. She allowed the records of her previous children to be sent to St. Clair's Hospital from Ellis for comparison, even though she could have refused. And it just didn't seem to be the actions of someone who had attempted or actually murdered their own children. She spent all of her time at the hospital. She would cry to whoever would listen about what had happened. She would talk about how lonely she was, how her friends and family had abandoned her in her time of need. Some of the nurses said that they wanted to believe that Marybeth could never do such a thing, but it was hard because no matter how many sob stories they heard, she could never look them in the eye. A well-known doctor in the area sent Mary Frances to Boston Children's Hospital to undergo extensive testing and look for any kind of chromosomal abnormalities or anything that might present as some kind of death gene. But the findings were completely normal. So they just suggested an apnea monitor. On February 20th, Mary Brett on February 20th, Mary Beth brought her back, this time in full cardiac arrest. She was revived again, but this time she was brain dead. As she stayed on the respirator, Mary Beth said that she would keep it on until her heart had stopped. But she did have friends and family there that were with her, that were supporting her, telling her that her adopted son Michael needed her, that it was okay to let go. Again, the nurses noticed that who she claimed to be versus what they felt about her were two very different things. Doctors agreed after Mary Frances that something seemed strange and they suggested an investigation. So they they pulled every thread they could, and they could not find a shred of evidence that this mother had suffocated her babies. They were suspicious, but the investigation brought nothing forward. There was no evidence. So the cause of death was listed as no anatomic cause of death. Mary Frances was buried next to her 5 siblings. Mary Beth was pregnant less than a month later.
Okay, at this point, like, her husband is part of the fucking problem. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just gonna say it. Like, you know what is happening to your kids. You cannot be that blind to it that they're being left with their mom
I
and then
think he was
dying.
literally being like intentionally being like oblivious, like intentionally oblivious to what it was. And we're going to talk about Joe in a minute because Joe sticks by Mary Beth to the very end. Even after she literally poisoned him with phenobarbital and tried to kill him.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. She tried to kill you.
He literally let everyone believe that he attempted suicide instead of telling anyone that his wife poisoned him. She had crushed like 70 pills into a cup of grape juice and gave it to him.
I'm equally as disgusted with him at this point, to be perfectly honest, because you just
Yeah.
keep getting this bitch pregnant who keeps your kids keep dying.
Yeah. And you're just like, it says he wears the same suit to every funeral and just sits there in the corner while it happens, while Mary Beth like prances around and like acts like some kind of demented hostess. So messed up. They still had
Continue.
their adopted son, Michael. He was 6.5 months old and he was as sturdy as they came. But he did develop a hernia after going camping. His adoptive parents took him to the hospital and they told Mary Beth that Michael was Black and he needed to be tested for sickle cell trait before undergoing surgery for the hernia to prevent any complications. Mary vehemently denied that Michael was Black. She told everyone that he was Italian, which was not true. She would not let him be tested. And the doctors went ahead with the surgery because he had to have it, but it was a serious risk she took, and the doctors knew that it was. Fortunately, he was fine, but they noted that it was Mary Beth that had declined everything. Her next baby was born November 19th, 1979, weighing less than 5 pounds. Nathan had suspected kidney abnormalities and hypospadias. They kept him in the hospital for weeks because they knew that if she took this baby home, he would be back and not alive. The doctors kept a very close eye on him just to maybe see if Jonathan was the answer to the other, quote, unexplained deaths. With some extra testing that they did, they learned that Jonathan, like his siblings, did have abnormally high blood ammonia levels. This was especially uncommon in infants, all of the babies had hyperammonemia. I'm sorry. Mary Frances's blood ammonia level had been almost 340 micrograms, but after 72 hours in the hospital, it had dropped to the normal 72. Jonathan died March 24th, 1980, after an eerily similar emergency room trip that mirrored Mary Frances's last. Both had ended up in the ER, underwent extensive testing, and then were referred to Boston Children's Hospital. They left after they were resuscitated and monitored, and then they returned days later after being sent home, dead. Cause of death was cardiopulmonary arrest. When Michael was 2.5, he toppled down some stairs, and he was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. He got a Band-Aid, and they suggested that he might have a mild concussion, but he was fine. The nurses reported the incident to Child Protective Services, and they told Marybeth, because no one is getting more mad than the nurses in these ERs, like all of the different ones she's taking these kids to. And they're like, you are going to be investigated. They barely talked to her anymore when she came in. They were very cold to her. If they saw her walk in the door, they knew what was happening. Allegedly, a caseworker did call Marybeth, but that was the extent of that investigation. But Michael's symptoms weren't going away. He wasn't balanced like a normal 3-year-old. He was vomiting. He was screaming. He was holding his head constantly. But Marybeth refused to take him back to the ER. On March 1st, Marybeth claimed that she could not wake Michael. She called her in-laws. They told her, go to the emergency room right now, but she didn't. She called the doctor's office and told them that it wasn't an emergency, that she just needed someone to see her son. She took him to the doctor's office 2 hours later. And the nurse who saw her in the waiting room knew what she would find wrapped in the blanket that Marybeth clutched. This time, the cause of death was acute pneumonia. Michael did have pneumonia, but not severe enough to warrant his death. And this bitch had another kid before police finally knocked on her door. On August 22nd, 1985, Marybeth was 42 when she gave birth to Tammy Lynn. On December 19th, she called a friend who was also an LPN and asked her to rush over. Cynthia Walter arrived to find Tammy Lynn unmoving and purple. Marybeth claimed that she came out to check on her and found her tangled in the sheets, unresponsive, and the baby was pronounced dead at the emergency room. Her cause of death was listed as SIDS. Cynthia went to her friend's house the next day to show support to Marybeth and Joe, but she found them just eating breakfast like nothing had happened. After the funeral, she again invited friends over for brunch, just hosting a party. Police arrived after this investigation was opened, and Marybeth announced, I know why you're here. You're going to arrest me and take me to jail. Joe told police he had suspected his wife, but chose to trust her. Which, I'm sorry.
Arrest his ass, too.
Your entire family is calling CPS. They're telling you to leave. They're like the doctors and nurses, everyone is suspecting this, and you're just sitting there? Not cool. They could not get an arrest out of the 14 years of paperwork that had accumulated over 9 child deaths. They had to interview Marybeth Tinning, and they did for hours and days. She continued to say over and over that she didn't do it. But inevitably, she had to confess, and she did. Marybeth confessed to killing Tammy Lynn, smothering her when she started to cry, and Timothy, and Nathan. She stated, I had 2 children who died because I put a pillow over their face, as I did with Tammy. I did this because I felt I was not a good mother because I lost the other children. But she hadn't done the same to Nathan. She had used a sofa pillow that she had taken in the car with her, and he had been crying. She claimed that she used the pillow again until he stopped crying, and she didn't know how long it took. And then she went to the diner. His time of death suggested that he may have been suffocated at home and then placed into the car seat and driven to the diner where Marybeth worked. The waitress that she asked for help with had told Marybeth over and over again how cute Nathan was, how sweet he was. She knew how much the waitress loved that baby, and she did it to spite her. She maintained that she didn't hurt her other 6 children. She was arrested and charged with the murder of Tammy Lynn. Many things were suggested to be the reason why Marybeth was never caught. People being generally uncomfortable confronting a mother who had lost child after child, the causes of death being consistent with the autopsies, the lack of communication between hospitals, social services, medical examiners, and police, and inevitably, psychologists who say that Marybeth Tinning had Munchausen syndrome by proxy. She enjoyed the attention she got after losing each of these children. Marybeth tried to say that she had been coerced, that the police had threatened her, that the babies all died from a genetic predisposition. But after going to trial, the jury deliberated for over 20 hours, over 3 days. And on the afternoon of July 17th, 1987, Marybeth Tinning, 44, was found guilty of murder in the second degree in the death of Tammy Lynn, showing a depraved indifference to human life. The jury could not agree whether she had intended to kill her child
Are you
because it
fucking kidding me?
they were only looking at the one. She was sentenced to 20 years to life. And I know you're all already pissed off, but to piss you off and even more, Tinning, when she was 76 in 2018, was released in August. She served 31 years. Her husband, who supported her through her entire imprisonment, was there for her release. And as part of it, she has to remain under parole supervision for the rest of her life. But she's out. She's a free woman.
Now would be a good time to enter the screen.
To what'd you say?
Now would be a good time to enter the screen.
Yeah, you can enter the rage break. I recorded it. The thing, it's right there for you.
I have very seldom, since we've been doing this podcast, have a case that has infuriated me as much as this.
I knew it was going to make you mad, honestly. And on it made me mad. How does this happen 9 times?
Yeah.
Over more than a decade, like 15 years of this happening in the same area. They're going into the same hospitals. Doctors know. And there were doctors still like defending her up until like the 7th kid.
How does one who has so many unexplained child deaths adopt a baby?
Exactly. And honestly, one who had already been in the foster system and then just said, I got pregnant.
Yeah.
I can actually tell you how she adopted the baby. Around the time she adopted her, the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of adoption like legislation was going through, making it safer. And people started doing baby brokers where they would buy a baby and someone would, maybe a lawyer, someone who that was their job. It's fucked up either way. They paid $5,000 for Michael and bought him.
To murder him.
to murder him. Yes.
I have not
And
felt
all
rage
because
like
she was
this.
jealous of her sister-in-law who had adopted a daughter. Her son, her sister-in-law and brother-in-law, um, Joel with cerebral palsy was from a previous marriage, but she just felt like maybe they shouldn't try to have babies due to her genetics, and they opted to adopt, which fine, that's your choice. But to see that and see like the attention that they're getting and be like, me too, I want that. That's and then Carol, who tried to get her help, who was like, something is wrong with you. Let's get help. And she just ghosts them in a fucking hospital waiting room. That's the balls,
I would have fucking killed her.
honestly. Like if I was Joe, I would have put 70 phenobarbital in her grape juice.
To be one of those nurses who know what is happening and there
Who
is
can
nothing.
see it
I am
and to feel
speechless.
that helpless. Like a lot of I did
I
read
would have been
that,
like, "I'm so sorry, your baby passed away in the NICU. Sorry, go home." And then I would have just taken the baby.
and it's just like Mary Frances revived and Nathan. They were both revived and healthy after leaving.
That's
And
what
then
pisses me off.
I feel like
She went
after,
back for it again.
yeah,
Oh, stupid bitch. If I knew where she lived, I would go stand in front of her house with a sign every single day that reads, "You are a baby killing monster."
right? Like that's where all those abortion protesters should actually
That's
be
where they
standing
should
in front
go.
of fucking Marybeth Tinning's house.
Dude and
I
her
cannot
husband.
believe that she is free. Like
I
I understand
Why
that.
couldn't they have introduced all the other babies? It's a pattern. Like she confessed, it's a pattern.
And they tried. Like a couple of years later, they tried to because she had confessed to Nathan and Timothy. But again, because babies are so small, the the evidence they had lined up with Sid's. So it could have easily they could have gotten off on it anyways.
I would
So
have
they
taken
just
I think that was an error. I think it would have
oh yeah.
placed in just enough reasonable doubt in a juror, especially if they had kids. If a mom is sitting or a parent is sitting on that jury and they're like, she admitted. I mean, it's a confession.
You
It is
have
a confession.
and it's like, okay, maybe for a while you can say death gene. Maybe 3 kids, all right. I can see why like a community might be like that's really heartbreaking for her. I'm sorry. But after your adopted son who has no genetic link to you also passes away, what the fuck is going on at Marybeth Tinning's house? And they were all only in her care. Joe was never there when it happened. Or if he was it was like the middle like with Tammy Lynn it was like 3 in the morning or something.
I don't understand how you don't prosecute with a confession.
I don't
That
either.
is blowing my mind, and I am so pissed off by that. Like, I am so pissed off. You have a goddamn confession. You have a confession. I don't understand what else evidence do you need? What do
Her
you need?
her redacting things, saying that she was threatened and coerced into saying it, you know, the same the usual suspects.
This is the most disgusting case I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's fucking awful.
It's disgusting on her level, her husband's level. Just sit there and say you were purposely like you turned a blind eye. Oh, I was just I chose to no, your
And then
kids
she's
are
literally in prison for 30 years and you just hang around? Like,
Mm.
no. You could have had ugh, You honestly, he didn't deserve to have. They deserve each other. They truly do. They deserve to be miserable forever.
Yeah, because at that point, it's not a you're scared thing because she's in prison. You could have ran as far away. Like, your kids are being murdered. 9 of them specifically. Like 9 of your kids, every single child that came into your house, besides the 10-year-old that she sent away, which luckiest break
Good.
that girl ever got.
No joke. Joe it was suggested that after she tried to kill him, Joe just sat back and just let her, like, stayed out of her way to prevent anything from happening to him again. But it's like,
You
leave.
just kept
That's
getting her pregnant. Go get a secret vasectomy
right.
so
And that's
she
what
never
his
can get
brother told
pregnant.
him to do. Like, go get one. And she had told people she had gotten a tubal after her last one, and that it was a miracle that she was pregnant again. But the
I
doctor who allegedly gave it to her was like, I never gave her a tubal. I told her that I would do it and that she should get one, and she declined.
I would have thrown my medical license out the window and I would have done something traumatic to her. She had to have a hysterectomy or something like that. I'd have been like,
Oops.
oops,
Blood out on the table. It happens.
I don't know what happened. She just kept bleeding.
Like, she's lucky that she didn't get jumped in an alley by a gang of nurses who worked at those hospitals.
It makes me so sick.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
I was just like, I don't cry very easy. And then I'm like sobbing. uh, I cannot believe that big of a oversight from like an investigation CPS standpoint was allowed
And
to
like 9 kids in 14 years? It's like a kid every other year.
Hmm.
Every year and a half this is shit is happening.
And it's the same hospitals. Like the nurses know you. Like this is not
Yeah.
like it's like you're going to different states.
No, I mean, they did move a lot. They moved to different, like, places, but it was, you know, it was Ellis, and then it was St. Clair's, it was Bellevue, it was the same 3. And at Ellis, I guess it was more of, don't quote me on this because I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it was a state hospital, and she stopped going there because people started fucking calling her out when she walked in. They were like, you. I guess one lady told her that she needed to get her tubes tied if she was trying to fill up the cemetery. And she stopped going there. She went to the Catholic hospital because she didn't think that they would talk to her like that there. Because she was no longer getting sympathy. They were seeing her for what she truly was.
This is a fucking monster. I said the F word way more times than I have.
I
And
honestly, we did. We dropped some bombs this
I'm
one because it's
sorry.
just so messed up. It's
I
crazy.
am appalled. Like, I want to find out where she lives now and go punch her in the face.
We
That
could
is
do a
how
road trip.
disgusted I am with this. And I want to kick her husband in the balls as well. I hope that when it is her time to pass, it is the most excruciating death that I could wish upon anyone. I hope they bring her back enough times, maybe 9 to be exact, and then just finally let her fucking die. And I hope the rest of her life is miserable. And I hope his is too, because fuck him as well. That's, she's killing your kids. And I can't get past that. I think I'm more mad at him than I am at her.
For just letting it happen
For
forever,
just
for that
getting her
long.
pregnant. Like, God damn, man. Come on. Ugh.
She went up before the parole board 6 times until it was finally granted in August of 2018. But she still lives in that same area. In the same house that she shared with her husband.
I want to send her mail every day with confetti dicks in it. And when she just opens it, it's just dicks everywhere. and she just has
Fucking
a
dicks
mess
and
to clean.
potatoes.
Just,
Send her dicks and rotten potatoes.
dude, what the hell?
Yeah, I'm
I'm
sorry,
honestly glad that
everyone.
I'm glad we recorded this one early in the day because I'm gonna stew on this all night.
I was also glad because I did not want to go to bed thinking about this case. Like, I'm gonna have to watch like a cartoon, like an animated movie or something, to not think about it.
I think it's hard too. We're moms. Like we're
Yeah.
moms. And I would do I mean, I've had kids that were sick. I mean, I've been at a hospital with a kid with like 105 fever. 100 like my middle son's fever was like 106 last year when we went in. Like I've been at the hospital. I mean, I've all three of my kids were born premature. My youngest daughter was in the hospital for a week after we had her. And I didn't want attention and sympathy. Like
No, you
I
just want
don't
your kid to be
I want
okay.
my kid to be fine. Like I my daughter had central sleep apnea. So when she was first born, cuz I had her early, she would gasp when she was sleeping. Like it was like she was pausing, and at first like I took her to like ENT cuz I thought like it was like tonsils or adenoids or something, and then when we had to do an MRI, she was 11 months old I think when we did it. She and they do this MRI because with central sleep apnea, because like her sleep study, they came in and put oxygen on her during her sleep study. That's how severe it was. Doing this MRI, because they're telling you, like, they have to give you like the specific reasons. They're like, we are looking for a tumor, we are looking for a brain deformity, something. And that was the longest 24 hours of my life. Like, I don't think that I, I mean, you don't breathe that sigh of relief until they're like, look, it's okay. She's probably going to grow out of it. I mean, she was still on oxygen for another year when she slept.
I was getting ready to ask, is she still on oxygen
No, she
when she sleeps?
finally grew out of it. I mean, she still has some episodes, but it's not significant enough where she has to keep oxygen on. But I mean, that is terrifying. Like, it's terrifying. I don't even like to think about it because it was such a traumatic time for all of us. And I can't imagine her, like, find something else if you need attention.
Anything else? Like,
Anything.
be sick yourself. Like, pretend you're sick.
Mm-hmm.
Send your kids to places where they're not in danger. Like, you're willing. Ugh.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm,
I know. It sucked. I'm sorry about it. I felt like I really had to, when I was reading it, it was like I kept getting ahead of myself because it makes you so angry and you're just like,
mhm.
I'm going to tell you this, but I'm already mad about it, so I'm going to talk faster because I'm mad
Yeah.
about it. And yeah,
I'm going to take a quick ad break and then we're going to come back with a happier story.
lighter topic.
Do-do-do-do. Um,
Internet
to
magic.
I want to brighten everybody's day with this story because after that case, we need it. I'm going to tell you about what happened to me this weekend. I took my 12-year-old. First of all, I have bred an army of miniature emo children. They like all the good music. My oldest, I mean, it's not emo, but like my oldest is obsessed with Def Leppard. Like knows every one of their songs.
This is a good story. Okay, we're good.
Like he's obsessed with it. So he has been asking for like 2 years now to go see a Def Leppard concert. And I was like, okay, okay, fine. So I bought him tickets. It was supposed to be me, my mother-in-law, and my son going to see Joan Jett and Blackhearts, Poison, Motley Crue, and Def Leppard. So we go. My mother-in-law actually got sick, so she couldn't go. So we took my oldest girlfriend, who is also 12.
Just
First
you
up,
and 12-year-old kids at a Motley Crue concert.
which
Just how
side
God intended.
Side note, whenever I go to a concert, I never eat because I usually just, like, drink beer. I spent $100 on 3 pieces of pizza, nachos, and Dippin' Dots.
Ugh.
I know
Ouch.
that's the thought I had too. So, Joan Jett was up first. She was phenomenal, like, phenomenal. I was up, like, in awe at how amazing she sounded. Like, they were just amazing. Next up was Poison. I think Poison's a little cringe, but it was a really good show. Like, it was great. Def Leppard and Motley Crue took turns throughout this tour. It's like a stadium tour on who goes first and who closes out the show. Motley Crue was next. And I am embarrassed to say how obsessed I am with Tommy Lee because I know he is like a gross individual, but there is something about that dash of trash that I'm just here for.
Dude, if you've never read The Dirt, the Motley Crue bio,
Yeah,
highly recommend.
yeah, I have. And he's like, like he's
The
gross.
story of them sticking their dicks in breakfast burritos changed who I was as a person. I was like, nope, 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 nope.
I thought that Motley Crue would be closing out the show. I didn't know, and that's kind of the vibe. I was like, all right, Motley Crue's going to be. I don't know how that's going to be. Def Leppard is they're class acts, you know. It's fucking Def Leppard.
Yeah, for sure.
As classy as they can be. So Motley Crue's up, and it sounds great. Like what's his name? Vince Neil was a little. His age has taken a toll on him. The vocals were but the music itself was amazing. Everything was going good. And I want you guys to know that my kids are sheltered children for the most part. My 12-year-old is like, there's a lot of stuff he doesn't watch. We don't watch anything with nudity, none of that. Well, then I hear Tommy Lee walk up. It's like the end of it. Like there's one, I had like pulled up the set list. So I knew like there was like 1 or 2 songs left. Right before Girls, Girls, Girls comes on. He's like, how are you going to call this place Cincinnati? And I haven't seen any titties. Instantly, I'm like, no. Before I could cover my 12-year-old's eyes, tits everywhere. Like, just girls, which I'm all for it. Like, honestly, like,
well, it's like, that's the place to do it. If
that's
you're
the place
going
to
to
do
do
it.
it, yeah,
And like,
why not?
I mean, I could say nothing. I got hot and sweaty and gross at a Taking Back Sunday concert once, and I watched half of the show in my bra. So, like, I get it. Like, but as a mom who was there with her 12-year-old who just wanted to watch Def Leppard, he got to see boobs for the first time with his mom and his girlfriend.
Again, just how God intended.
Just how God intended. And his face, when I tell you, I wish, because I was like, oh my God. And then, like, I thought it was over. And then they panned back to the screen and, like, I had taken his hand down and there's just, like, more boobs.
It was I told you, core memory right there, unlocked.
Core memory. And then to add to it, there was a mom next to us who had her teenage daughters with her. It was like the mom, the husband, teenage daughters, and then maybe one of the teenage daughters' boyfriends. The mom got ham sammied, like we did
She
on the
earned it.
Harry
Good for
Potter. She
her.
earned it. Well, it started off, she was just, and I saw myself in this woman. Like
Like,
she's
couple
like,
of years,
she's
you
just
and
like
me, baby.
kissing up, like she's like kissing up on her husband, and like it was adorable. I was like, oh look. Well, then I look over during Def Leppard, and she had reached peak form, and she was straddling her husband, and because it's like a stadium, so it's like the Cincinnati Reds stadium. She's like straddling her husband in the chair, giving him a lap dance, like from the front. And I think nothing of it. And
Good.
Parker,
Honestly, again, she earned that night. She
she
can do whatever
did.
she wants.
Or my son is like staring, like, oh my gosh. And so I thought this is the perfect time to traumatize my child. And I looked at him, I was like, what do you think dad and I do when we come to concerts without you kids? It was
No.
wild. Like
Wow.
wild. I was like, he's always gonna remember that.
can't wait to see your kid again so I could be like, hey man, how was the concert?
And these were like they were the girls that were like flashing were, like I said, they 20 years ago. No, not 20. That'd have been 33 or I'd have been 13. But like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, that could have been me, you know? But they were like surgically enhanced boobs, which is like dope.
Lucky
But
them.
I looked at him and I said, that is not what they usually look like. Like,
That is not the norm, friend. What did
but it
his
was
girlfriend do?
the look. So I thought that girls, we had a moment in life that made us jaded towards that type of thing, like where we're like, ugh,
Jaded before becoming accepting.
yes, yes. And not so much like the girl, like, I don't think she had a problem with the girls doing it. It was my son looking. And I thought that, like, something had to happen in, like, a past life where you, like, just realize, like, "What are you doing? You're my boyfriend." But the look she shot him, like, just and just daggers. And I was like,
To be 12.
mhm, mhm.
Man, that is a great story. And I'm honestly sad I wasn't there for it. I know you told me where it was. You're like, come on out. And I wish I could have gone because
Oh my gosh,
that would have been hilarious.
I didn't know what to do. Like, I'm
There's
all
nothing
about
you can do.
no. And there's no way I was gonna be like, "Oh my god, those girls." I just was like, "Whoop, let me just cover your eyes." I didn't make one comment one way or the other than letting him know that's not what they usually look like. I just wanna set his bar low for when that time comes.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
But the best was looking when because Def Leppard put on an amazing show, like, amazing, and watching I didn't even watch them most of the time, I was just watching his face. He was like a Christmas tree, he was so lit up, it was amazing. So, if any of you are thinking about taking your 12-year-old son to the Motley Crue stadium tour,
Bring a blindfold, I guess. Or you know what? Let him have it. Like again, he'll be telling that story when he's like in college, like with
yeah,
all
for
of his
sure.
friends. He'll be like, dudes, the first time.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that'll be hilarious.
That was the first time I'd been to a concert where I had nothing to drink other than, like, Diet Coke.
How was it? It's
It was
weird, right?
it's weird, it's weird.
Yeah. Since I quit drinking, concerts are a little bit weirder. Like, but I still enjoy them. I'm really sad because I registered for the pre-sale Paramore tickets. That's going to be in Cincinnati, and I got waitlisted, so now I can't get tickets.
Oh,
But I hope I get
I
a text that says you can buy them because I'm going to get them.
I, the previous night, like, just the night before, my husband and I went to see the Doobie Brothers,
I know you had a
which
big concert week.
is exhausting, and, like, that's my husband's jam, he was all about it. It was a good show, it's just not really my style of music,
Was
so I
Santana there?
no, that was 2 weeks ago, like, we were supposed to go see Santana and Earth, Wind& and Fire, but Earth, Wind& and Fire played, but then Santana was sick, so they rescheduled that to August 3rd. But my middle sister sent me a text message that she got me and her tickets next week to go see the Backstreet Boys. So that's more my jam.
They were just in Indiana.
Yeah,
My sister-in-law went and she had the time of her life. She said it was amazing.
I love the Backstreet Boys, so we'll
I was an
see.
NSYNC girl through and through.
Really?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, my brother texted me when the Backstreet Boys concert was happening, and we had gone and seen them a couple of years ago. My brother took me to go see Backstreet Boys, and we went together, and we had like a great time. And I was like, honestly, wish it was in sync now. And he's like, why did I take you to see Backstreet Boys? And I was like, because Justin's never doing a reunion tour.
Mm-mm.
And he doesn't need it, but I do.
We
I
do.
just want to see like Dirty Pop live, live in concert.
I bought 100 butterfly clips that got delivered on Sunday. So I'm going to put butterfly clips in my hair. The blue eyeshadow's coming back. Like, I'm 90. I'm gonna be 90s out. I'll have to post a picture so you guys can see me at a Backstreet Boys concert.
Yes. I'm so excited to see your butterfly clips. Now I want to order some too.
Please don't. I have 100 of them. I'll just give you some next time I see you.
That's what happened when I was like, I'm going to order some scrunchies. And you were like, don't order scrunchies.
I still have so
I
many.
bought 100.
It's just such a good deal at Amazon. I can't not do
You
it.
can buy 100 for 14 cents.
Yeah, it's true. I don't even know what these are made out of. Like carcinogens? I don't know.
Definitely 100%
I paid
they're in there.
$6.
Got 100 scrunchies.
I'm gonna twist it back like this and put the butterfly clips in.
Yeah. So cute. So cute.
This would be my sister and my older cousin, and he is a hoot at concerts. So that shall be fun.
Is that in Cincinnati also?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
closer for me for Cincinnati, but I just love going to concerts in Indy.
I do too. It's fun.
It was that or Machine Gun Kelly, and you know that no one wanted to go see Machine Gun Kelly with me. So
Look, I wanted to go. I couldn't go in the 2 days notice that you gave me.
that's ADHD. That's having a friend with ADHD.
I wanted to go because Avril Lavigne was playing, but I did not want to see Machine Gun Kelly.
I don't. He
wanted
has
to
the
see
Tommy
Megan
Lee
Fox.
effect.
Yeah, I know. It's your dash of trash.
I just like it. Like, I don't
I
know why.
just like it. They're
That also
disgusting.
explains my first husband. Just a dash of trash. I
Oh,
know what
man.
bad boys do. I'm not part of that. I need my yacht rock listening, like, old man husband that I have.
Yeah, now you just need a yacht and you'll be set.
My in-laws just bought their brand new pontoon. They spent more on that pontoon than most people do on their houses. So it is really
Lordy.
nice, though. Yeah. They told me what they spent. I was like, yikes. That go on layaway? Because
I'll come pick it up in 20 years.
You can come out on it.
Oh, I can. Thank you. No one else, though? Not anybody else, just me.
No one else, just you.
Good.
It only holds 14 people, which is quite a bit until you realize there's 5 of us. So.
Actually, with your in-laws, there's 7 already. Mm-hmm. That's half.
It's half. I can fill up with half of the other people. I can auction off tickets for our party barge if that's what you guys want.
Do you want to come on our party pontoon?
Our party pontoon for the low price of $20,000.
Not worth it. Don't do it. We're not worth it.
We're not that fun. On that note,
you'll catch me going to sleep at 8:30.
It's true, you do. But she'll be up bright and early to make us breakfast.
That's true. I will.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.